Hello, and welcome to 5-Minute Math. Today we are looking at the 6th grade concept of division, specifically what happens when you divide a decimal by a fraction, and we'll do it in 5 minutes or less. So this is a strange looking problem here. We have a decimal, 48 and 24 hundredths, and you need to divide it by 1/6. So how can we do that? Well, one option is sometimes you can turn this fraction into a decimal. Now, 1/6 is not necessarily a benchmark fraction that we learn, but we know that we can turn any fraction into a decimal if we divide up. So let's see what happens if we do that. 6 does not go into 1, obviously. So we're going to make a decimal. 6 goes into 10 one time. And then that is going to be a 4. We're just going to keep adding zeros, and that's going to be a 6. But look, I've gotten into this loop. It's just going to be 40 and 40 and 40 no matter what. So it's going to be 1.66666 forever, or we can call it 0.16 with that bar over the 6, which means we can't really divide by that. You can't really divide that into 48.24 because this is a repeating number. So that's not going to work. So another option is to think of reciprocals. Okay? So one thing that we learn is that when you divide by a number, so let's take 8 divided by 2, we know that's 4. It's the same as multiplying by its reciprocal. So 8 times a half, or half of 8, is also 4. So this 2 is really 2 over 1. So dividing by a number is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal, or when you flip it over. So we could do this. We could take this division, turn it into a multiplication, and we could take this 1/6, and we could flip it over. It'd be 6 over 1. Well, 6 over 1 is really just 6. So what we could do is we can say 48.24 and then just multiply it by 6. So that's going to be 12, 14, 48, 49, 24, 28. I've got 2 digits behind the decimal, so I need 2 digits behind the decimal. 289 and 44 hundredths. Another way to visualize this would be, you could say 48.24 over, because that fraction bar does represent division, right? 1/6. Now, we're not used to having a fraction in the denominator, but what ends up happening is if you have a fraction in the denominator, it ends up flipping. This stays in the denominator. Since this is the denominator of the denominator, it actually flips up here, and it becomes 48.24 times that 6 over 1, which is exactly what we just did. So we have some options on this one. We have 19 and 5/10 divided by 3/4. This is a benchmark fraction. So if we want to, one option would be to just change that into a decimal. We know that 3/4 is the same as 0.75. So what we could do is we could say, all right, 0.75 divides into 19.5. Now, one thing to keep in mind is you really don't want a decimal in the divisor. So I'm going to multiply this by 100, move it over twice. I'm going to do the same thing over here. It's going to look a little bit better if we pretend it's 75 into 1,950, right? And then we're just going to multiply here. So that's going to be 150, and that's going to be 450. Need to estimate that a little bit. I think that's going to be 6. Let's see. Yep, that's going to be 450. So it just ends up being 450. And so our answer here is 26. Or, remember, we could do that other thing. We could say 19.5, and we could multiply it by the inverse, right? 4/3, which means we could say 19.5 times 4, and then we could divide that by 3. And so that's going to get us 19.5 times 4. That's going to be 3638. 78 divided by 3. And guess what we're going to get? Well, I'll give you the answer. We're going to get 26, because it's going to end up being the same thing. So there's multiple ways that you can divide a decimal by a fraction.